All right. Welcome back to another episode of the More Than Outdoors podcast, the podcast where we explore the people, places, and passions that drive Maine's outdoor recreation economy. As always, I'm one of your co-hosts, Austin French,
I'm Sam Andrews.
and we get a nice cozy setting for our episode today. Even though you can clearly see our breath, it is definitely winter out here, but we have a fabulous guest who has so graciously lit up a fire for us to stay warm out here while we're kind of chatting about an amazing business up here in Franklin County, right in the valley. And so Justin Steele is joining us on the podcast today from Hostel of Maine. Justin, thank you so much for being able to come on the podcast and share your story.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So what we like to do in the beginning of this, because I think everybody's kind of got their roundabout way of like, how did they end up in the outdoor recreation world? So I would love to know, like, what was that inception story? Like, where did you get started in outdoor rec? How did that then transition to like here at the hostel? Love to know that story.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think I had like a single moment that really was a catalyst or anything like that, but I was lucky enough to have grandparents that were pretty outdoorsy. They wanted to go bring us skiing in the White Mountains and bring us hiking up there. We spent a lot of time just going up with them on weekends and staying in a condo and just kind of enjoying it up there. So that was great. My wife is half or more probably of the heart of this place, and she grew up in Portland and grew up skiing up here as well. So I had skied in New Hampshire mostly because we were in Berwick. Grew up on 50 acres and spent most of my time that I wasn't, doing something. I was out back biking around, uncomfortably on a mountain bike, trying to just explore new parts of the, land and figure things out, and it was great.
Cool. That's really cool. So when did kind of this whole part of your life begin? Like, when did the Hostel of Maine come to fruition?
Yeah, Hostel of Maine came to fruition officially in the state's eyes and everything like that in 2018. So we opened then. It really started probably around 2015 or so. We started seriously considering this. When I met my wife, we had our first date at Great Lost Bear in Portland, and she remembers that I told her I was going to start a hostel someday, and here we are. So she's obviously been a great supporter of it, even though it wasn't her initial idea, and we traveled and spent some time in hostels ourselves together, and I had done that in Europe prior to 2015, prior to meeting her, and I just recognized that it's such a huge part of my memories of Europe, and just all the good times I had were in some way related to something that happened at a hostel or people that I met there or something else that just kind of encouraged those really kind of amazing experiences.
Cool.
I've also had those shared experiences in hostels, and I was just sharing with you, like, this is my first time kind of walking in this space, and I've had my fair share of hostels over in Europe as well, and actually in New England, because there's kind of like a culture that's popped up because like affordable, not affordable housing, but like affordable vacationing or staycationing even is so popular, especially for like people in my age group where like we're still building our lives. And so it's like, how do we go and stay somewhere without paying like $150 for a hotel?
Definitely.
And so I feel like hostels are a great way to learn about the area and the culture, and also have like an affordable place to sleep. And I just love the fact that you get to meet people from all over the world and travelers that you would never otherwise, and you also wouldn't learn about like secret spots in the area either, because you get to kind of pick their brain. Where have you been? Or, oh, you're a local because you work here at the hostel. Can you share like where I should go for a swim at the like swimming hole or whatever it is? So I loved the vibe walking in, and it seems like a very special place up here. And you spend a lot of time up here just skiing at Sugarloaf. Like we are not even 10 minutes away from the mountain.
Not even. You're basically right at the base of the access road, more or less. Well, and it's so funny because, like, admittedly, I have never stayed here because I've always worked here, so we always had our like seasonal rentals that we were doing and stuff like that. And but I've had people who have like come to visit me, or they've like come to do PSIA events here, and they've stayed here at the hostel, and it's like it's so cool to hear, because I think it really does make the very unique like crafts experience of coming up here into the valley,
Yeah.
right? Because like community is a word that gets thrown out 10,000 times throughout all of our episodes of the podcast, right? But like this really is like that's the quintessential version of that, where like really a lot of what you guys have here, it's like very shared space model, right? Like everybody, you're coming here because you were interested in doing something that this valley had to offer to you.
Totally.
And now you get to like sit around the dinner table with folks and talk about, oh man, like, did you guys get over to like, Double Bitter today? Like the skiing was unreal. Like, oh no, I didn't even know that trail existed. Like, so you get that level of like conversation that happens. And you'll never be able to convince me that just like happens in a normal hotel, you know, or like people like, they like nothing wrong with it, but like when they go and rent an Airbnb and they're renting like a private residency,
right.
Cool. You got that space for whoever your group is.
Yep.
Awesome. But now you're having to like outsource that additional piece of like
Definitely.
engaging with all of the other folks that are also coming to experience that place,
So will you explain a bit about the hostel? Like for somebody who's never been here before, what is it like? What are the rooms like? How could you kind of like come in and use the space as a single traveler or maybe a group traveler?
Yeah.
Like travelers.
It's a great question. Like? We get that question a lot.
Yeah.
I would say that people definitely have a preconceived notion of what a hostel is.
Yes.
And I'll probably talk more about this later, but for now, I think people are just envisioning possibly only shared accommodations, only shared bunks, and kind of like no privacy at all. And what we offer is just a little bit better than that, right? So we're offering bunk beds in a 6-person shared room that have a little bit of privacy between the beds. And so, yeah, sure, you're sharing a room, but you're getting a great deal. You're getting breakfast. You're on the shuttle route. And it honestly works really well for a lot of people that stay with us of all ages. Our average age sometime in the bunk room is 53 years old. And other times it's 22. It just really depends on what time of the week and what time of the season and all of that. But we've got 2 bunk rooms with 6 people each. We've got 7 private rooms, which is kind of flip-flop from a lot of hostels that are out there. Sometimes they'll have mostly bunk rooms and 1 or 2 private rooms. But we find that that people are looking for the community aspect that we offer, the social aspect that we offer, and they're not always at a point in their life where a bunk makes the most sense, right? Whether they're taking a vacation with a spouse, or whether they've got family, or whether they've just never stayed at a hostel and they want to try the private room first, or maybe they just never want to stay in a bunk room. That's totally fine. Like, we don't have any judgment for people one way or another. It's just giving people options. And we have had so many wonderful experiences at inns and hotels and Airbnbs even, and they all offer a little bit of a different experience. And I think, to your point, what we're offering is just pretty unique, and it's not often available to people. So when they're looking for that, we're a great option. If somebody is just despises humanity and all they want to do is get on the chairlift by themselves and push the other people off the chairlift and go down the mountain and go home and be grumpy the whole time, they probably won't fit in here. But whether you're introvert or extrovert, whether you're looking for a private room or a bunk bed or anything like that, it's a pretty comfortable place for everybody, and it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. That's really cool.
Yeah, there's a place for everyone here. That's really awesome. I noticed the earplugs and the personal fans, and like there's just a lot of different things that can make it feel comfortable for a variety of different people. Yeah. I'm like getting smoked out right now.
Well, but I think like to save you a little bit here, like I think that's one of the interesting pieces. You talk about like, you all went and experienced all these different types of accommodations, and I got to imagine that like whether it was a mental list or like a physical list that you were writing out, like you're taking notes, like you're figuring out like what are all of these like best practices or little tricks that you could bring into a place like this, and so I think about those types of small details that like that probably totally changes the experience for someone, where now all of a sudden like they don't have to think about like God bless the person who ended up in a bunk room with me, because like I'm gonna be snoring and like cutting every tree down in this room, like, right?
I've been needing those earplugs.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Right. So like and for somebody who hasn't gone to a hostel before and hasn't really rolled with that shared space model, maybe they're not thinking about the earplugs until all of a sudden they end up in the bunk with me.
Totally.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Totally.
so like those little things could very much so save that person's vacation.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And it didn't necessarily cost much outside of like you all having that sort of intuition and forethought to be like, hey, this could be useful for somebody, right? Is every single person going to use them?
Nope.
No, right? But it could come in handy in these very specific situations. And so, like, why not do it?
That reminds me of a fun little story on our honeymoon in New Zealand that we stayed at this guest house there. And it was a pretty social place. It was fun, really, really cool owners. But honestly, their breakfast was both the simplest thing ever and like mind-blowing for all of us. So you wake up in the morning and you walk into their kitchen and there's just fresh made bread. Just the smell of it, just this amazing loaf of bread right there. There's these different spreads they had. Like it was just amazing. Coffee, of course. You know, can't survive without that.
Nope.
But it was so simple at the same time. They made bread, right? And they provided like some spreads. And we saw that and thought to ourselves, you know, we've stayed at places before that offer, they've got bacon, they've got sausages, they've got pancakes, they've got the whole 9 yards, and all of it you're not really that interested in eating because it's not that good, right? And, you know, we're not trying to be a $700 a night place.
Right.
So we can't always provide a free farm to table, like perfectly executed by a Michelin star chef kind of breakfast. And so where do we find that middle ground of offering options but also having high quality? And we found that doing simple things well has been really, really appreciated by our guests. And so we've got, you know, whether it's a muffin or a homemade banana bread that we make, we've got the fresh made bread every morning, which has been a hit. We do fruits and hard-boiled eggs and lots of other great stuff, but it was just one of those examples of being able to explore the world and really just see, wow, there's so many great ideas out here. There's so many cool things that people are doing, and like, how do we bring that back with us here and share that with Sugarloafers?
Yeah, keep it simple.
Yeah. Well, and it's fun. Like, you know, I connect a lot of that to like some of the things that like Sam and I have talked about since starting this podcast. It's like you go in and you're like, oh, we could do all of this like all at the same time, and you're like okay, let's take a step back for a second. Let's be a little bit more methodical with this, and like what are those things that we know we can deliver at like a high quality. The other things are going to come, right? Like in whatever way, shape, or form we see fit once we get to that point, right? But lock in on the things that like you can control and bring to a really high level. You know what I mean?
We've been thinking a lot about like our mission and values of this podcast and kind of the why of what we're doing, because when it comes down to it, this is a passion project for us, and we're really you know, we have our full-time jobs as you do. I'd be curious to hear yeah, we have a lot going on, and like I think that helps motivate us. So I'm curious, like, what is the why for the hostel for you, and kind of the mission and values of this space?
There's two big whys I guess there's three. There's three big whys for us. And one of them is just an experience that I had driving from Berwick to Gunsock Mountain in New Hampshire. And it's maybe an hour, a little bit more. I can't remember right now, but I was 19. I was had a lot more energy than I do now, but I was done the day snowboarding and exhausted, and I wasn't drinking yet at that point in life, and so I'm driving home and I'm just tired from snowboarding, right? And yet I'm barely keeping it together at 5:30 on a dark night, and I'm driving an hour and something home, and I'm sure everyone's had an experience like that before and probably regretted their choice to drive, but the part that really got me was that I didn't feel like I had a choice, right? I was 19 in between jobs, figuring out what, you know, just dropped out of college, like just kind of just needed to get outdoors and enjoy the mountain, and didn't have an option to say, I'm just going to stay somewhere, right? Because everywhere that I could have stayed was $125 to $175 minimum, and that is a great deal nowadays, right? But then whether it was a good deal or not, it was
Right.
still
It wasn't in that budget.
way out of my
Yeah.
budget. And so here I am driving and thinking like I'm risking my life, and other this is a terrible idea. I pulled to the side of the road, but I'm thinking to myself like, wow, this is so wild that like there's not just more options. And so when I traveled and stayed in hostels, I was like, this has got to be a thing in the mountains. This has got to be a thing in places people actually go. And like you don't have to drive back to Portland day of. It's just wild. The other one is really just being able to get people outdoors and just having that, not just access financially, but access in terms of like location, access in terms of comfort, right? Whether people feel like they can ask other people, staff, other guests, how are the bigalows? How's the water? I've never done it before. Like, can I do all that in a day? And it's just nice to be able to encourage people to kind of get out there.
Sure.
And I think the third one is that classic said 3,000 times community idea. But in our case, the way I look at it is that I think we're one of the closest things you can get to a third space while having to pay money.
Yes.
So I don't love that part. I wish we had all the money in the world, and this was, something where we could just invite, thousands of people in to be able to do that. But we don't even have a lot of those options, the paid options, right? Yeah. We don't have almost any of the free options, right? There's not a lot of Irish pubs around here where people go to hang out with their community. There's not meeting halls that people are kind of interacting with each other at. And I just have thought even before we started this, and I don't think it's gotten any better, but I've thought even before we started this that that's something like desperately missing from our country right now, and probably the world, but our country especially. So it's really neat to be able to have a place and have a business where you see the humanity in everybody. And we don't have like you pull up and you'll see a 92 Honda Civic, and we've had Ferraris pull up before and stay in the private. And it doesn't matter like where people are coming from or how much money they have or any of those things, what their political affiliation, none of it matters. They're up here to enjoy the outdoors. As long as they're respectful and kind to each other, that's all that matters. Right. And they can stay. And so being able to see people interact with each other and just kind of like have that experience has been really wonderful for us.
That's really cool. Yeah.
You're truly in the heart of Carrabassett Valley.
Yeah.
And I mean, we know this place well and know the magic that it holds. And I think that there's a lot of people I talk to who live in Portland or even live in Maine and they've never been to the Bigelows or or maybe they're not a skier or a mountain biker. There's a really big like skiing, mountain biking culture up here. And I would argue even like hiking and paddling because Flagstaff Lake is pretty amazing. But yeah, like if you could share a little bit about like this space, like your hostel is kind of in the middle of an epic outdoor recreation hub, essentially.
Yeah, we're very lucky. I mean, we couldn't have picked a better spot because I think our first year we thought, oh gosh, it would be really cool to be on a mountain, And sure, if it was free, would that be neat? Absolutely. But that would have never happened, right? Yeah. And so being where we are in the valley is just magical. Like there are the outdoor center trails within walking distance on our dirt road right over here. We can go across the street and go to the main Hudson trails. Like we can go 3 miles up the road and go to the Appalachian Trail. Yeah. We can go 2.5 miles up the road and go to the Base Lodge. And there's just Flagstaff. Yeah. Like even Rangeley is only 45 minutes or so away. So there's so many wonderful places around here. And when you look at it on a map and you think about the options, whether it's trail systems, whether it's just destinations, it's really I couldn't have picked a better place. We're very lucky to be right here where we are.
Yeah, it's like quintessential. Like we talk about the Western Mountains of Maine, and it's like then you show up in this community, and I mean like I know it's like something we talk about in the snow sports school all the time of like, a lot of the sort of investments that the mountain has made, especially with all the West Mountain expansion project and everything, has really been designed around like how can we balance out the terrain that we're able to offer, right? And like now I can get someone to the top of Timberline and from there I have a green run all the way home.
Mhm.
And when you get to the top of that and you look around at what is in this valley, right? Whether it's the Bigelows or being able to see Flagstaff directly on the backside of it, or you look down the whole southern portion of the valley where you have all of those trail networks that are intermingling through it. I mean, not only does it make you feel extremely small in terms of like the grand scheme of things, but it also it's an incredible sort of moment and sensation of like I I feel one with this place,
Mhm.
right? And all of that just came from a view, let alone then actually doing all of the activities that this place has to offer. You know what I mean? So it's really unique. I mean, I'm always going to have a soft spot in my heart for the valley, right? Like just because of how much time I've spent here, but I love that you guys are bringing this additional craft piece into that overall experience. I would be curious, like, and this is something we haven't talked a ton about on the podcast yet, and so I'm hoping we can kind of get into a nice little lane here.
Mhm.
But like, Sam kind of joked about it of the, many of us are looking at one full-time job is kind of like a really funny remark that we all joke about, right? But as we really think about, I would love to explore sort of the entrepreneurial journey that you've gone through of like taking this thing from non-existence to like where it is now.
Mhm.
And I think there's a lot of people, hopefully in our audience that maybe are thinking about like what is that new venture that I might want to start and make my impact on the outdoor rec economy that way.
Mhm.
I would love for them to just kind of like hear that piece of like being the business owner.
Yeah,
too.
definitely. There's so much, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think if I had to just think of it in broad terms, and I don't know if you guys have talked about this at all on the podcast before, but I think that there's data out there about the number of business owners, especially small business owners, who maybe are neurodivergent, maybe have just like some pretty intense ADHD going on. And so I think that has been honestly some of what has allowed us to just persevere through it. This place is just chock full of novelty every day. I mean, there's like between the guests we get and the different needs that they have and the 7,000 square feet of log cabin to just technology and marketing and relationship building and just I mean the washing machine breaking, there's just so much out there. So I think that novelty and that human interaction has really kind of allowed us to persevere. And so I think my wife has also just been a really amazing contributor to it not all falling apart. Her ability to stay organized and stay focused on what really matters for those days and those weeks and ongoing. And so I think if I had to think about just broadly anybody who does or does not have something like that, then I would probably encourage them to be pessimistic when planning and optimistic when executing, because I don't think that there's any other way to be successful. Our plans were built by me and they've kind of mostly worked out. But I think if we were a little more pessimistic in those, it would have allowed us to kind of make some better plans. It would have allowed us to just think about, well, what happens when a manager is, has a family issue, needs to kind of like move on and you don't have a manager. And okay, now what happens if your family in Portland is struggling or you need support in a certain way and you decide to move back there and now you absolutely need a certain amount of staff every day to get this to keep this place running. And so some of those challenges, I think if we had been more pessimistic, it would have been helpful, because instead we've kind of like they felt a little bit like a whoa, that was out of nowhere, which can be a little bit disheartening and stressful. But I think we've done a pretty good job of bouncing back from them. It didn't necessarily help that we opened the business in 2018, had our child in 2019, and then 2020 some crazy stuff happened. So it's kind of felt like a little bit of a whirlwind. But I would just encourage people to do some planning. but to stay optimistic. And I think if that's not your personality, small business is not for you.
Yeah.
Like, you have got to be the kind of person who can bounce back. You've got to be the kind of person that can see the positive in doing the nitty gritty or the, not glamorous stuff. I think about somebody's ability to walk into a room and just de-stress from their drive up in their life and all of those things when I'm scrubbing a toilet. I think about when I'm crawling under the porch and trying to fix something. Like, it's got to be about like what people are getting out of this experience and just all of that. So that's probably my biggest advice, at least.
Yeah, well, and in hearing you like have that answer and then tying it back to like the sort of why question, right? I think that's the thing that I pulled out the most too, was also like you found this thing that like you had an extremely high level of passion for, right? But then to your point, once you go and do that on your own, it's a totally different ball game than being like, oh, hey, I still have a boss. Somebody else is signing my paycheck. Like, everything's hunky dory here. To like, it's on you, like that, and you're either going to make it happen, or something else is going to go in the complete opposite direction, right? And I think, it's funny because we talk about that at the university a lot. Like, when I'm teaching in these business classes, and I tell students all the time, like, that same thing of like, please understand that not everyone is cut out to be an entrepreneur, right? And I'm sure I'll get some flack for that, but like, I think that's a really difficult conversation that sometimes we have to have with folks, because a lot of the times that's just a miss in the self-awareness category of, right, if you don't desire to have the things that come with that lifestyle, right, then you're always trying to like jam the square peg into the round hole, and then it's that much harder when all of a sudden you're like, it is 2 a.m. and like the laundry machine just leaked all over the floor, and I'm the person, like, I'm the person that has to deal with it, right? And if you're not like so bought in and committed to all of the other parts, right, those 2 a.m. calls are going to be the thing that eventually just you say, well, okay, this isn't for me anymore, and I shut the doors, right? Which is never obviously what we want, you know what I mean? But I think having that realistic conversation with ourselves early on, right?
And I'm sure that there have been lots of times where you're like, I think I'm that person. And then the challenges pile up. And I think that's the other part of it too, is like, you never really know until you try, which might be the argument of like, not everyone's an entrepreneur. But I see like the pretty obvious challenges, and we talk about them on this podcast, with outdoor recreation being a career, having some kind of career in outdoor recreation. There's the seasonality to it. But I also think, like, we were talking about the amazing location you're in. And with that comes challenge, because we are surrounded by wilderness, which is amazing, but there's not a city of Portland filled with people who want to work for you. And so some of the challenges you're talking about are staffing. And I think that's a huge one that we see in outdoor recreation in Maine being an issue. And we talk about, well, how do we offer that person a year-round position so that they want to stay in this industry and they want to make it, their livelihood. And we see those issues with like ski mountains, and that there's a lot of seasonal employees, and it's hard to make ends meet and also make a living off of it. So I know that you have lots of feelings about this, especially like, it sounds like that's been your challenge. So curious how you've navigated it, if you found a solution for it, or no.
Absolutely no.
Still in the idea phase.
So there's a few big thoughts I have around staffing, and I usually come to my opinions from my own experience, like working for companies myself, and also just trying to put myself in our staff shoes. And you can ask any of our previous staff. I don't always do that well, so I'm sure there's a lot of improvement to be made there. But when I think about some of the reasons that people are moving up here, or that they are staying up here when they were born here, and when I think about like what their goals are and what their aspirations and also what the challenges are, I just see a lot of people who are desperate to have like a wonderful time in the outdoors and just really just envelop themselves in this community. And one of the biggest issues is just always been housing. And in the past, I think it was an issue, but it was a manageable one. You know, there was enough people that would sacrifice comfort to live with 4 other lifties and just make it work. And those options were out there, and they weren't for everybody. And I think we lost out on a lot of good talent even then, right? But I think now it's an extreme. You know, there's not a business in hospitality that's paying a dollar amount that is comparable to the increase in housing from that time. So if you look at like 2010, or you look at the 80s, the 70s here, you know, all the times where people are looking back and saying, you know, those were really good times. And that was when they came into the area, and that's when they were able to buy a house or kind of like figure it out. It's just not even comparable anymore. The amount you have to spend on housing to live in the area is just so crazy. And so I feel very strongly about that, strongly enough that, you know, as part of a Q&A with one of the conferences over the years, I remember addressing a few different people at the state levels as saying, if you're really not working on housing, then you're not helping small businesses at this point. And I don't mean that to detract from the great work they're doing, but, you know, whether it's a plumbing company or a hospitality company or anything else, like, if I don't have staff, what can I do?
Yeah.
You know, I'm just one person here, and I'm not a very great, you know, at lots of things. There's a lot. So the staff really, they make it. They're so necessary to the experience here, the longevity of the business, the you know, guests being able to kind of like come back and have a similar wonderful experience. And it's the same with the mountain. You know, it's the same at Sugarloaf. It's the same with the town and the trails and Maine Hudson trails, and it's the same with everybody. And I think when we see that housing is the number one, you know, reason that people are not able to kind of like come to this area or stay in the area, I think it's crazy if we don't do more to address it. And as just like an interesting timely side note, I remember in 2018 when we started, I remember telling people that it was like, I don't think I would have started this if it wasn't for having affordable health insurance. So we were no longer on, you know, parents' plans at the time, of course. We were no longer anything like that, and we had a marketplace plan, and it was able to be, you know, subsidized because, well, we were starting a business, so there was not a lot of profit. And I mean, to be honest, there still isn't a lot of profit, and we're able to sustain the business and do a little side work ourselves to kind of make some money other ways. But yeah, health insurance is huge too, and I think that's going to be a possibly big part of 2026 for a lot of small businesses, because we cannot offer health insurance. It's just impossible at this point. So when somebody's looking at whether they're going to work at Walmart or go up here, all of a sudden, like, even any sort of corporation looks a lot better.
Yeah, it's like lifestyle choices and decisions, and likely very young staff members who are able to have their family's health insurance or have a lower, you know, premium given their age. But yeah, that I see those challenges. I mean, being on a board and kind of going through the contract, that's a big piece of hiring staff right now. It's like I mean, not necessarily the housing in this one instance that I'm thinking of, but insurance, 100%. And I could see maybe offsetting the housing, given that you have an amazing space here, but are you able to house anybody or staff-wise?
We're not.
Okay.
And keep the business afloat.
Yeah.
So what we did
That's a challenge, yeah.
for about 2 years was we tried to house some staff. In addition, we do have a manager team on site, and so Kanan and Jenna are living downstairs with their baby Edie, and they're wonderful. And there's a little apartment down there for them, but there was some other rooms in the basement that it's a daylight basement, so it's a lot nicer than it sounds, basically.
Yeah.
But there were a couple other rooms, and the reality of just the increased cost of everything and was that we needed those rooms to be able to pay the mortgage and the payroll and everything else. And so It was nice to be able to offer that, but it's just not feasible for us as a business. I think, if we had all the money in the world, we could build some additional housing here, but outside of that, we're kind of relying on the community to be accepting of new housing, which I think is a big deal. I think people's opinions and their voices are huge when it comes to whether housing gets built or not. And I strongly encourage everybody that's in outdoor rec or just cares about each other to be proponents of housing, and even if that's not perfect housing, just proponents of building more housing.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we have the conversation every single year at Sugarloaf about it, right? And like trying to figure out like what's the perfect answer. There is no perfect answer, right? But as we were looking at, like again going back to, we're doing this West Mountain expansion. That's I think it was like 250 home lots, right, that they're adding, right? And immediately from the seasonal program side, we're looking and going, okay, let's assume that those houses are bought by either your like typical family of 4 or the grandparents that now have the kids who have the grandkids who like all want to be part of this community, right? And so all of a sudden that's like 200, 250 additional participants, right? So I mean, we talk about it all the time, like those conversations and those investments that, like, I know Sugarloaf is doing a lot of different things in terms of working within the valley, especially to figure out like what are some potential options for us to be able to push forward those kinds of things, right? And I think lots of people win because of those decisions happening, but to go back to your point, oftentimes those things also need a far larger community buy-in than just like one business being like, well, hey, I really need this and it's a really good idea, like just trust me.
Totally.
So I think having that larger conversation happening at the grassroots level where you're like, we're all in this thing together. And for like a place like Carrabassett Valley, right, there are very key businesses that make this place thrive and make it what it is. And I would say that, like, I would put the hostel in that category, right? And so, like, how do we make sure that the people that want to call this place home because they want to be, having all of these resources directly in their backyard, and they want to be employed with all these places because they see the value in getting more people into these environments and getting them exposed to like the way of life, up here in Franklin County, it's never going to be an easy equation, but it requires a lot of conversation. But I think we're always going to be in a position where it needs to be a discussion.
Yep.
At least for the, I would say, medium future, right? Like I can't speak to something that's going to happen 50 years from now, but I mean, in the 5 to 10 year window, I can't imagine, that this isn't continuing to be a discussion. Even if we, said right now, boom, we're gonna do everything we possibly can to build as many options available, right? Like you have to have time to build those things and then catch up to all of the supply and demand curve issues that are currently in the market, so.
Do you know of anything, like any changes in the past couple of years that are happening in this area that are addressing housing?
The Western Maine housing group, I can't remember their exact name.
It's okay.
Is I believe now under contract with Weyerhaeuser to buy land from them just up the road.
Oh, great.
Which will be wonderful.
Yeah.
I think that's desperately needed, and yeah, it'll be great.
Probably overdue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think it'll be it'll look like a lot to people, and I think it'll fill up pretty
Yeah.
quick. So I think it's easy for people to see development go in and think, wow, that took a lot, but the reality is that the number that we've built has just kind of separated from the amount of people wanting to live here for many years. And so when you think about the difference there, it's pretty stark. But yeah, it's exciting to hear that we're actually going to break ground on a decent sized project and really have a lot of appreciation for everybody who volunteers their time for that organization and everybody that went into making that happen.
Totally.
I mean, there's still a lot of work to do. but
Yeah.
it's exciting that's gonna
Yeah,
Sure.
that's a step in the right direction.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's
We'll
great.
take all of those steps.
Yeah, we will.
So,
Well, I'm thinking about, like, I always think about my next 5 years and what they might look like, and I'm curious about what you see in the next 5 years here at the hostel, and like what is kind of like your ideal, like maybe like dream big, like what do you see happening here?
yeah, I mean, dreaming big is my mo.
You're the dreamer.
Getting it
Your
done
wife's the details.
sometimes happens, but dreaming big is easy for me. So, we have recognized after being off site and needing to pay a mortgage separately from this mortgage and support just all of those pieces and have the great staff that are on site and doing all the work, that this place has to be bigger, and that's okay, because we think that we can kind of like hold on to what makes it really special, and if anything make it more special, because the ability to have a few more people staying in maybe a couple tiny cabins around here and maybe a small additional building or so on top of those, would just enable some really fun and interesting things that we could do, that we really can't do with the current scale that's at right now. And food is always a fun one to throw around, because we have this wonderful kitchen in here, and we've even got some staff members right now that have some restaurant experience, and we've got the state slightly changing what they said that we were allowed to do when we opened versus what we were told we were allowed to do now. So we are in the middle of building a great guest kitchen for folks in the dining room, and so if anybody stayed with us before that's listening, they'll remember our toaster oven and induction hot plate that made many wonderful meals, but maybe weren't the most ideal, and not having a sink in there was less than ideal. And so we've got a full kitchen kind of going in the dining room right now, and that's going to also allow us to make the kitchen, into the commercial kitchen, into a fully licensed one that could actually sell lunches or dinners or whatever we figure out is going to work for our model. And then separately, just paying the oil bill is always a tricky one here, and I would just absolutely love to have a much better insulated roof, maybe some timber HP, not to throw any names around there, right?
We can throw names,
but just to have a really well insulated building, and put solar on there, and get some great heat pumps in there, and just really kind of make the whole place a lot more self-sustaining, kind of from an environmental perspective, because there's a lot of I tend to overthink things a little bit at times, which is funny, because at the same time I can also just jump into things, so it's one or the other really with me.
Sounds like me.
Being in the outdoors, and like being in Maine in general, and I want to not just leave it this as we found. I want to leave it better for our kids and just everybody else. And so having to heat this place, and having to spend $1,000 on electric bill already at the CMP, and just all of that is pretty wild to me, and so finding ways to reduce our impact is a pretty big part of our aligns with our mission and values as well.
Cool.
I can't wait to see what happens in the next 5 years.
I know. All right, so we have this segment that we try to close out every episode with, and it's just voices from the summit. We are not quite at the summit per se, because there's about 3,000 feet above us, but nevertheless, great opportunity to just get to pull back the curtain a little bit, know a little bit more about you, about the business, all that good stuff. So first question, what is the best conversation starter in a hostel?
I think we're biased here, but I think it's about outdoor adventure. I think it's about what you're doing the next day, or what you did that day. People just they love getting outside, love having fun, and so if somebody's asking them what trails they were riding, or how many times they've been here, and what their plan is, or something like that, it sparks people. It's great.
Well, I was sharing a conversation with somebody who was staying here too about outdoor recreation. It's an easy way to be like, hey, I know that you're a stranger, but it looks like you just came in from a ski. How was it? So I agree. If you were to describe the vibe of the hostel, how would you do it?
Gosh, I would
have to try really hard. So it would probably be friendly and warm, and I think it would. It's just kind of like it's a social place, but I think sometimes when I say the word social, people think like, I don't want to talk right now, but that's not what it means.
Yeah.
Like it just means that people aren't gonna be rude when somebody brings up, what ski trails they were doing that day.
Or
So,
standoffish.
yeah, and
like welcoming.
it just kind of reminds, like, it's just the opposite of that experience I had when I was traveling for business and would sit down at the breakfast counter and be, drinking my coffee and look over at somebody and be like, hey, how's it going? They'd be like, good. And just have their face down in their laptop
And you're
just
like,
miserable.
got it.
You're like, great.
good chat.
Yep. Have a great day. So kind of the opposite of that.
Yeah, cool. Describe the future of Maine's outdoor recreation economy in one word.
Diverse.
Cool.
We haven't gotten the same word.
No, we haven't yet, which is amazing.
It is. Would you rather a shared meal or a shared adventure? That's a tough one.
A shared meal, because I just really love when somebody else cooks.
Yes.
It's really nice.
Me too.
I respect that. I respect that so much. So last one, and you have a little bit more leadway with this, so please do not feel like this has to be a one-word answer by any stretch. But if you were trying to kind of like paint that picture of one amazing memory that you would want the first time guest coming to the hostel to see, what is that thing?
Like, how would they look back on it?
Yeah,
basically. Yeah. I think it's either the feeling of walking in the front door and being able to just relax your shoulders and de-stress from your week or your drive up or whatever was happening for you, and just be able to feel like you're at some place that you can kind of call home and that you can be yourself and be comfortable and just enjoy, or maybe the moment that they wake up and walk into the living room and dining room and smell the bread and the coffee and everything else going on, and just are excited that they were able to kind of wake up in a cozy spot like this and have their adventures kind of at their fingertips right there for the day.
That's awesome.
I really want to come here and experience that bread.
Yeah, I know. We've heard it so many times. I'm like, tell me more about these spreads that you also have with the bread. Like, I want to know the pairings here.
I'm coming back.
But awesome. Justin, thank you so much for being able to come on the podcast and do this conversation with us.
And bearing the cold. I know
Yeah.
that it's a chilly day out.
Yeah, for any of you watching from like your nice warm inside zone where you got your fireplace rolling, it's like 14 degrees outside right now.
Yeah.
So
with a breeze.
Yeah, with a light Sugarloaf breeze. So if this doesn't convince you that we are not all committed to this outdoor recreation economy thing, I don't know what else is going to. So with that being said, we will make sure that all of the social media handles and the website end up in the show notes for sure. But please, so that way you can keep up with all of these amazing conversations that we're having, make sure that you're subscribing to all of the different streaming platforms. Make sure you're following us on all the social platforms, because let's face it, we tend to do a lot of other cool content that isn't just the episodes in those places too.
We try.
So like make sure you're doing those things. But with that, thank you again so much. And until next time, we'll see you outside.
See you outside.
Thanks, guys.